Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Simon Hodgkins, and a real pleasure and a treat to be joined by Alice Rackley. Alice is the Chief Executive Officer of an organisation called Polytag. Alice, you're very welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much for having me, Simon. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Alice, let's start with your journey. What led you to Polytag, and maybe how is your background in digital transformation, ESG, how is it influencing the company's mission today? Because you really are revolutionizing, I suppose, the global recycling industry.
Well, I'm not actually the original co-founder of Polytag. There are two other gentlemen that set the business up before I arrived, and they had spent their careers working in the problematic waste streams, I suppose, and they've got really great deep knowledge in recycling and plastics recycling in particular. And it was because of that experience that they recognised that there was an opportunity to introduce technologies to support with better plastics recycling and indeed a transition to plastic circular economy. I actually met them in 2021 when I was at the time the head of UK retail for GS1. And GS1 are a standards agency. They're actually global organisation, not for profit, and they are most famous for issuing the barcode standards. So what does a stripy barcode need to look like to be read at the checkout? And they also issue all of the barcode numbers in the world so that they can guarantee that the barcode numbers are unique. And I was working at GS1 because I had spent the previous 20 years developing digital technology for retail. And of course, barcode technology is at the heart of a lot of the work that I'd done previously for the likes of Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose, and also a short time as a consultant for Deloitte working in their retail team. So yes, it was as much of a shock to me as anybody that I did what I now call a double pivot. I moved from the retail sector, large corporate, to the recycling sector and a startup. And I've been in this role at Polytag for the last 4.5 years, and I've loved every minute. It's still my favourite job ever. And I love working with Phil and Brendan. Their original vision is still certainly key to the work that we're driving at Polytag today. And we're making progress.
You certainly are, and thanks for sharing that, Alice. Polytag operates at the exciting intersection of connected packaging and the circular economy innovation, which we hear a lot about today. Can you explain a little bit more about this two-tag solution, how it works, and the kind of impact that it's having on not just consumers of products, but also on brands, Alice?
Oh, we could be here all day, Simon. That's a big question. The circular economy is this idea that you can manage resources in such a way that they can be continually reused or recycled back into the same type of product or packaging multiple times, so that you avoid losing that resource by either burning it or burying it, which is what tends to happen, unfortunately, in the majority of cases, even today. So there is an urgent need to move towards more circular economies to protect the value of resources that we've got in circulation. Now, the other bit of your question was about how does Polytag support this? Well, yes, we've got a two-tag solution that we've developed. And the idea behind this scheme is that brands can apply one or both of the tags to their plastic packaging, because that is our particular focus area, is about the recycling of single-use plastic. So you can apply one or both of these two tags to your plastic packaging in order to understand where it is disposed of, and you can understand this at barcode level and at GPS location using a QR code solution powered by GS1 standards. Talk about that in a minute. And you can also apply a UV tag to your plastic packaging, which is invisible to the human eye, but is designed to be detected in recycling centres so that you can know if your plastic is actually getting into the recycling waste stream. So those are the two tags. One's a QR code, it's visible, it's designed to be scanned by mobile phones, apps, by the checkout even. And that allows you to understand where your packaging is disposed of. And then the invisible UV tag is designed to help you understand, is it getting into the recycling waste stream? And of course, both of those tag solutions ultimately are unlocking data that's never been seen before at barcode level, so that brands can get much, much better insight as to whether their plastic packaging is indeed being disposed of correctly and being recycled. And then they can use that data for all sorts of reasons, so to drive improvements, to benchmark their recycling performance, even to respond to legislative challenge. And the legislative landscape, particularly impacting plastics, and designed to move us towards a more circular economy, is certainly hotting up. And so, yeah, we work with a lot of brands who are keen to sort of get a better understanding of their plastics life cycle so they can improve and do better, but also to support them with responding to this increasing legislative wave.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Alice. And I was familiar with the barcode, obviously, because I can see it as a human, but I wasn't familiar with the invisible, tagging, which is really, really cool. And I suppose on our side of the fence, we work a lot with people who supply products globally, and a lot of the wording and the recycling wording and everything from the ingredients and the branding and the copy and the content all has to go on the packaging. And obviously, your solution dovetails into that, so that manufacturer, that large global brand, can actually do that traceability, which is becoming really important. So thanks for sharing that. And I wanted to ask you, if I can, a sort of follow-on question to that. So we know that sustainability today, it's sort of becoming central to how businesses worldwide are beginning to operate. Consumers are almost demanding it, and they prefer, I think, to work with brands that have a sustainable ethos at its core. But you must see big challenges, I suppose, or you've encountered challenges with maybe large brands when they may be reluctant or slow to adopt this traceable circular packaging, as you're referring to it. And is there any way that you can overcome that, or is it consumer demand driving it?
It's a really good question. I mean, I like to make a comparison actually to my previous career, where I feel like I worked through a digital transformation for retail, particularly. And I often say now that I feel like we're working through a sustainability transformation. And those businesses that didn't adopt new technologies to support them with a digital transformation, they didn't introduce online shopping, they didn't have really user-friendly apps, etc., etc., they actually went bust. And there is a very real possibility that over the next 5 to 10 years, businesses that don't adopt more sustainable practices and don't try and introduce ways to make their businesses greener and more sustainable and more circular will find themselves struggling. Yes, to your point, because consumers are demanding it. I mean, we all know that climate's changing. We all know that there is a real imperative to do something differently, right? So consumers are becoming more demanding, and they're far less tolerant of greenwashing, which is back to your point you were talking about. Claims on pack need to be verified. But I think that there is this other pressure, as I mentioned, from legislation. So governments are starting to seriously enforce criteria and starting to require businesses to think and act in more circular ways in order to force this sustainability transformation that I'm talking about. And so although, there is a commercial imperative to be sustainable in order to meet customer demand, I also think that there is an increasing legislative imperative to be more sustainable, because otherwise the fees and the fines and the taxes are going to be crippling if businesses don't start running their supply chains differently and thinking differently about how to make their products and services sustainable.
Oh, an excellent point. Thank you, Alice. And for those people listening to us, they won't have the treat of seeing your wonderful coloured background, which is the rolling green hills. And it brings me on to the next question, which is to talk about Wales, because Wales, I suppose, it's emerging as a global leader in recycling now, and you're proudly based in Wales. I know that. And, does Welsh culture, the government support, does it influence Polytag in any way, maybe from an innovation, sustainability practices? How did you end up in Wales, Alice?
Yeah, Wales is the world number 2 in recycling performance. at the moment, and there is every reason to believe that they're going to take the #1 slot in the next couple of years. They have, over the last 15 years, really taken hold of the recycling and waste space because it's a devolved matter, and so legislation can be shaped through the Welsh Government, the Senedd. And they have done an amazing job at overhauling every aspect of our recycling processes in Wales. So communication with households, segregated curbside collection. So they ask households to sort different material types into different boxes. So I personally have 7 bins. Doesn't sound as bad as that because it's stacked boxes. So, I'm only putting out 1 stack of boxes rather than like several bins. And they've also invested in their recycling infrastructure. And so for all sorts of reasons, Wales are an excellent example on the world stage at how to really do well at recycling and embed recycling philosophy into the culture of a nation.
Well, that's news to me, and I've never heard of a 7 stacked bin, so that's not in my part of the world yet. But
we've got 4 stacked bins.
Okay,
and
4.
A little food waste caddy, because all of the food waste is recycled using anaerobic digestion. And then I've got a battery bag, which I hang on the back, so I can recycle my batteries. So now we're up to 5. And then I've got a cardboard bag where I can put all of my cardboard. And then finally, I have a black bin. And it's worth saying that I think one of the interesting things Wales has done in terms of like influencing with nudges, we get our black waste bin collected once a month, and all of my other bins every week. So you can be damn sure you are going to recycle as much as possible, because if it goes in the black bin and that bin gets full before the end of the month, you've got a problem on your hands. So it's just a super smart move, and it absolutely does encourage everybody to make the most of that weekly recycling collection by recycling as much as possible. And then only as a last resort do you use your black bin.
Yeah, it sounds less like a nudge and more of a must-do critical. So that's really good. Let me bring it back, if I can, back to regulation and that sort of government influence around packaging and recycling, because Polytag, you can help a business, can't you, to stay compliant, and also sort of dovetail nicely with their sustainability promises. Could you bring that to life a little bit for us? How do you actually do that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll use a really nice case study that we've developed in partnership with Ocado, who are one of our long-standing clients. Ocado are the largest online retailer in the UK. And a couple of years ago, we used the QR code solution I mentioned earlier to power a rewards for recycling scheme, which demonstrated that there was a really large demand actually for an opportunity that householders could use to scan their empty milk containers in their home next to their home recycling bin using an app and be rewarded with a cash reward for doing so. And this was actually a precursor to demonstrating that a digital deposit return scheme is viable, that the tech is available. And over just 55 days, 20,000 customers scanned their milk containers by their bin using an app and got a 20p reward. And the demonstration also allowed Ocado to collect that proof of disposal that I was talking about earlier. So they knew for sure at a barcode level where every single one of those 20,000 milk bottles were disposed of according to a GPS lock on their home recycling bin. And, again, data that's never been seen before, that really is useful to inform their planning and also their reporting on recycling rates of packaging. And then the same containers that had these QR codes on that consumers were scanning for their rewards also had an invisible UV tag applied to the label. And those UV invisible tags were traced into the recycling centres that their recycling was taken to. And we were able to count those 20,000 milk bottles and know that they had got into the recycling waste stream. Again, data that's never been seen before at barcode level that proves Ocado's packaging is indeed getting recycled. And all of these case studies are available on our website if people would like to know more. And we've also got some good YouTube videos if people prefer to learn in that way. But we're really proud of the work we've done with Ocado and all of our clients, in fact, because they are kind of trailblazing and giving us an opportunity to prove that the adoption of our solution can have a meaningful impact, both in terms of data collection, but also changing consumer behaviour, and, as I said, respond to legislation with more robust information. I'm sort of always surprised, possibly because I spent quite a lot of my career working in retail, but always surprised about how little information there is about what happens to packaging when it hits the bin. And particularly when you can see that legislation is going to start requiring brands to calculate their taxes and their fees using information about their recycled material, I do wonder how they're going to do it if they've just got averages. You wouldn't really want to be calculating your tax on an average number, would you? You'd want to calculate a tax charge because it's based on real data, real proof. And I think that's the most exciting opportunity that we're going to be able to unlock for our partners, is we're going to be able to give them third-party verified proof that their packaging is actually getting recycled, and then they can calculate their taxes in a far more accurate way.
I can't see many CFOs in big brands going, oh, the tax is roughly this much. No, I think they're going to want to be a little bit more precise, Alice. Yeah.
Yeah, you would. And now that is a possibility with solutions like Polytags. I'm really excited to see how we can help them.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because not only is it a great case study and an example, and of course I encourage people to go and check out the Polytag website and the other case studies and solutions that Alice and the team have, but it's a real technology application that's making a real measurable difference. And also, I suppose, people maybe around the world may not be as familiar with Ocado, but in the UK, it is a huge part of the retail supply chain to get goods to consumers. And I've been following Ocado from the very early days, and then when Stuart Rose joined, who was the chief executive at M&S, and everything that's happened since. It is a huge case study and a win for Polytag. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to maybe turn the conversation slightly, Alice, because, and I hope you don't mind me saying this next bit, but I think you're also known as a bit of a straight talking advocate when it comes to real action, when it comes to sustainability. And I want to ask you something about that. And I want you to be as straight as you can, because there are a lot of myths about recycling, that it doesn't actually get recycled when it hits a plant, or there's a lot of myths and sort of untruths around the circular economy. Is there anything in particular that you really think needs addressing?
Straight talker, you've been following me on LinkedIn or something. Yeah, but on that point, there is rightly, I think, a lot of discussion and debate and loads of conferences that happen in this space, and people are not short of points of view and happy to share, and I welcome all of that. But ultimately, somebody's got to build a solution and not just stand around talking about it. And I'm very proud of the fact that Polytag are among the group of businesses and organisations that, of course, have a point of view, and we like to talk about the circular economy for plastics. But we've also rolled our sleeves up and got the spanners out, and we've built something. Particularly proud of what we've done in the UK, because we now have a blueprint for our detection systems. We're now rolled out across 12 of the largest recycling centres in the UK, ready to detect these invisible tags as brands put them onto their packaging. And so far, Waitrose, Marks and Spencer's and Ocado are the first 3 brands to start collecting this data in the UK using the network that we've built and installed. So yeah, I'm very keen on action, not just chatting, because it is really imperative we get on with this. What happens to plastic, I think was your question. So unfortunately, we are still quite a long way away from getting a decent percentage of recycled plastic actually recycled. Still, a lot of plastic either gets incinerated or buried. I mean, I'm talking globally now, Simon. So there's still a massive problem with the way that plastic waste is handled. And in fact, in some countries, it ends up in our natural world. So it ends up in the oceans or in the countryside, which is a real problem. Those countries that claim their plastics recycled are possibly being a little bit generous with that description, because still a large amount of plastic is downcycled. And what I mean by that is proper recycling of plastic would see a drinks bottle being recycled back into a drinks bottle. That is what you would recognise as being true recycling. But still, in a large majority of cases, plastic that is indeed recycled doesn't end up getting turned back into its original item, and in fact gets turned into possibly a pipe or a drain pipe or a bench or a type of product that is very unlikely to be recycled again. And so when that process happens, it's actually called downcycling, and very few people talk about that. But one of the things that we've been able to announce in the last couple of weeks, in fact, which we're very excited about, is a partnership with Polytag, who are one of the world-leading optical sorters. And what we've been able to demonstrate with Polytag is that combining their near-infrared optical sorting machinery with the ability to detect data in an invisible tag, we can actually optimize the way that plastic is sorted into much, much finer grades of plastic. So we can know if the plastic is food or non-food grade material. We can know if it's hazardous plastic or cosmetic grade plastic. We can also understand from the data in the invisible codes whether it's a virgin plastic or a first or second generation plastic, and use that to sort the plastic into higher quality, more optimal bales of material. We could even go so far as sorting at barcode level, so that, back to the point I was making earlier, we would end up with a bottle, with a bale of Coca-Cola bottles, for example, that Coca-Cola could then feed straight back into their bottling process and turn back into Coca-Cola bottles, which would be the definition, therefore, of successful recycling. So this opportunity and this partnership with Polytag and Polytag really has got the potential to increase the amount of proper recycling of plastics that we are aiming to deliver over the next few years, and move away from downcycling or indeed burning, burying and just leaving it into the ocean, which unfortunately is still a major problem.
Thank you for addressing that, because I know that is a topic that comes up a lot in this area, and that strategic partnership that you have now, Alice, seems to be not only incredible, but also maybe attacking the current challenges that we have at the source. And that optical sorting should hopefully be able to provide that different sort of grades of plastics, which will help in terms of moving away, as you say, from incineration or burying or even downcycling, and being able to tell whether it's a first, second, third generation plastic, I think is incredible technology. So thank you for sharing that. And that's a strategic partnership people should keep an eye on. That's very interesting.
I'll watch this space. We're excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why. Now, last question from me. Looking ahead, you've talked a lot about the UK. There's obviously global implications for Polytag, and there's also emerging technologies and global shifts. What do you think will significantly shape the future of packaging, shape the future of waste reduction, and also shape the future of this environmental responsibility that brands really have to get behind?
Thanks for that question, because one thing I did want to talk about was the use of GS1 global standards. So I mentioned right back at the beginning that I did work for GS1 for a short while, but there is something really important about building circular economies that I often talk about, which is that unless all of the stakeholders in, quite frankly, very complicated supply chains that you're trying to turn circular as opposed to leaving them as linear, they all have to talk the same language, and they all have to have a way to share data seamlessly. Otherwise, you don't have a complete chain. Something's broken. And so we are absolutely committed at Polytag to using GS1 global standards to drive all of the tech solutions that we deliver, and also to inform the format and the syntax of the tags that we provide to our clients. And I think it's absolutely critical, if we are going to build global circular supply chains, that everybody adopts these global open standards that GS1 publish and oversee. And the other thing I would say is that when you adopt global open standards, you also invite competitive excellence. And that's really important if you want to accelerate the adoption of circular supply chains and move towards a system where everybody is striving to do things as well as possible. The opposite is if people feel like they're dealing with locked-in tech, where there's perhaps a monopoly, and people feel like they're being potentially overcharged for services, and that actually isn't healthy for encouraging the adoption of circular practices or allowing circular supply chain to flourish. And with that in mind, we've never pretended that Polytag is the silver bullet. It's not. It's an answer to a small part of a huge problem. If brands would like to do more to improve their plastic packaging circularity, we are an option to consider. We're not the only ones, and we don't want to be the only ones. There needs to be a whole range of solutions that businesses can look to adopt. And so long as they are all adhering to these GS1 global standards, all of the systems will be able to fit together and work together, because all the data will be able to be seamlessly exchanged, and everybody who's got a part to play in making these circular economies successful will be able to do so. So I'd really like, it's a good point to end on, actually. We need everybody to play their part, and we've got a massive problem on our hands. So more people that are building solutions and trying to make progress, the better. But I really believe that for this to work globally and at scale, GS1 global standards have to sit at the heart of it, and they certainly do at Polytag.
Well, thank you, Alice, and a great point to end on, that how global standards really do power adoption around the world. So what a great point to end on. That brings us, unfortunately, to the end of today's show with Alice Rackley, the Chief Executive Officer of Polytag. I'm going to ask people to make sure they tune in again to see and or listen to the next episode of VistaTalks, where once again, we'll be discussing some more interesting topics with interesting people from all around the world, just like Alice. Alice, thank you for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
I've loved it. Thank you, Simon.